We're amazing. Sorry. Oh, wow. One thing. This is from that mother. Yeah. So I'm going to respond to her and I will share with the separate what that was because it's not exactly the way it was. So certainly we can grow for sure, but we're not. Right. Which is what. We're going to get started. We're going to start? Yep. Okay. All right. Good evening. We're calling to order the December 4th meeting of the Newton School Committee. Hello to everyone in the school committee chamber and hello to everyone watching us tonight on Zoom. We're going to start our meeting with our public comment period. This is a period reserved for members of the public to address the school committee and for committee members to directly hear your concerns and perspectives. We do not respond in this context, but we will listen and seriously consider your feedback. Scheduled conversations with school committee members are available in alternate formats. Members of the public joining us in person must refrain from applause, outbursts, or disruption, which will allow us to maximize the time reserved for public comments tonight. Remote speakers, when you are recognized, please ensure that your Zoom name matches the name that you need to request to speak. That's how we'll identify you to promote you to panelists. In-person speakers, I will call names from the posted sign-up sheet. When called, remote speakers will be able to unmute, state your name and your address, and take up to 3 minutes to share your concerns with the committee. In-person speakers, when your name is called, please come to this table up front, use the microphone, state your name and address, and you will also have 3 minutes. Both groups of public commenters will receive a 30-second verbal warning from our school committee member, Ms. Prenner, and she will let you know when your time has expired. So our first public speaker is a remote speaker, Jacqueline Lycan. Steve, do you see Ms. Lycan? Okay. Hey. Good evening. You may begin, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, and good evening. My name is Jacqueline Lipkin, and I live on Pond Avenue. My husband and I have 2 young children, one of whom is in his 2nd year at the Newton Early Childhood Program. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this meeting remotely because, as a lot of people here know, we're in the middle of the dinner to bath time to bedtime rush, so I appreciate being able to hop on and give comments. I wanted to speak this evening really, in summary, to share my family's full support of the Newton Public School teachers. I agree with a lot of sentiments that were shared by parents and educators in prior meetings, and I wanted to add an additional perspective as the parent of young children. You may have just heard in the background. I moved with my family to Newton in the summer of 2022. My husband and I were thrilled to find a home in a town with such a fantastic reputation, especially among their public schools. And while we've only been with the school district a short period of time, we've been really impressed with the care and support our son has received in the Newton Early Childhood Program. The educators we work with are really talented and they're dedicated professionals who work really hard to support our children. Even in our first year with the school system, however, I've grown increasingly worried about the support our educators are receiving from the community as communicated through the ongoing contract negotiations. The Newton Early Childhood Program lost 10% of their staff last year alone. And that was really scary to hear as a parent. If the loss of career educators continues at this pace, I'm really terrified to think about what my children's school experience will look like in 10 or 15 years. If we can't retain those talented educators, we will only continue to lose really valuable institutional knowledge because these educators won't see a path to build their careers in our community. I'm scared that this means my children will not have access to the high quality education that Newton children experienced in years past. I want to say also that in spite of these fears, I have been really impressed by the continued dedication of our educators under the present circumstances. And I see an opportunity for us to choose a better path and avoid the worst outcomes. A strong, well-supported public school system is highly valuable to the community, and once lost, is very challenging to build again. I think we should all be focused on supporting our dedicated educators through whom our school system is built. And I just want to say lastly that given all that we've lost in the pandemic collectively as a community, and especially all that our children have lost, I want to plead, thank you. I want to plead tonight with the city leadership to fully fund the Newton Public Schools immediately, including a fair contract. Thank you for your time.
Our next public speaker is in person, Ali Frank.
My name is Ali Frankie, 21 Mossman Street. My twins are in second grade at Horace Mann, and I'm a teacher in a neighboring district. I've been an educator for about 25 years, and I've lived in and paid taxes to Newton for 15 years. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I would first like to say thank you to each and every person on this committee. Growing up, my mom was on the school board. So I appreciate that it's thankless work, and it's also a lot of time away from your own children. So sincerely, thank you. While you don't know me, I feel as though I know the Newton Public Schools pretty well. Years ago, pre-COVID and pre-motherhood, I worked at Franklin. At that time, I can remember feeling privileged and even proud to be a member of the Newton Public Schools teaching force. When my spouse and I moved to Newton, I had no idea how much advocacy and fight I would need to have. We've had to fight for the Horace Mann building project, safe pedestrian crossing at Crafts and Albemarle, and to preserve school staff and programs. To give a little comparison, the elementary school where I work has 4 full-time reading specialists. I believe Newton's elementary schools each have a 0.5 reading specialist, and it's a position that's quick to end up on the chopping block. Consequently, most Newton families secure reading support through costly special education services and private tutoring. Last Friday, I had the opportunity to visit the mayor's office and leave a note. This is what I wrote. Dear Mayor Fuller, thanks so much for the fun golfing night. Please free the free cash now, so our second grade twins can benefit now. We love Newton and its teachers. Please settle the contract with the NTA ASAP. We know the money exists. If the thought is that we need a rainy day fund, I would argue that in Newton, it's been raining for a long time now. We NPS families need you to settle the NTA contract, and we need you to do it now. Please stop spending our money on lawyers and start spending our tax money on teachers instead.
You have 30 seconds.
If you don't, we may as well change our signage. Newton, the Garden City. Come for the schools, leave for the schools. I have a few friends and neighbors who are also in support of settling the contract as soon as possible. These are their words. Kim Bordeaux, 18 Stoneleigh Road. I'm a mom of 3 Horace Mann students, taxpayer and homeowner who moved to Newton for the schools. Elizabeth Zimmer, 161 Waltham Street.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Please refrain from public expressions of support. Next is Cheryl Wormer.
Hello. My name is Cheryl Wormer. I am a parent of 3 children in Newton. 2 go to Franklin and 1 goes to Day Middle School. I'm here today to ask the school committee and the mayor to settle with the teachers on their most recent proposal. As a parent, I have followed these negotiations closely, and I have felt very uncomfortable with the general approach that's been playing out in the public. It seems as if the school committee has really controlled the narrative with the emails that have come out to families. And I found them a little bit misleading at times. The teachers are not in a position to counter what is being said, and they don't have access to all of Newton parents as the school committee does. And I feel as if they're in a position where they are very vulnerable, and I feel as if their vulnerability is being taken advantage of. When I see some of the communications highlighting salaries of teachers in neighboring districts, it seems like there is this aggressive effort to try to say that Newton teachers are being paid better than other districts and don't require as much of a raise as what they're asking. But to me, this negotiation is about retaining the teachers we have and bringing in skilled teachers to so that it is consistent with the raises that other districts are getting. And I feel as if what the teachers are asking for is not unreasonable. I see them here at events. I see them in the community. I see them putting in a lot of time for their voice to be heard. And I see the efforts they're taking as not being aggressive. I've seen other districts take much more aggressive measures that have seriously impacted children and families. And I'm asking the school committee to not let it get to that point and to settle with the teachers and to give them the contract they are asking for. Thank you.
Our next public speaker is remote, Lena Zuckerwise.
Can you hear me?
Can you speak just a little bit more loudly?
Yeah. Is that better?
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to keep this really brief. I just have a really simple comment, which is obviously that Newton School should be fully and immediately funded for all the reasons that that residents have already articulated. But I just want to offer a brief bit of perspective as the parent of a middle schooler who receives extensive special education services in one of the district's special ed programs. And that is to speak to the expertise of behavior therapists, aides, and other paraprofessionals who are also among the most underpaid educators in the district, and are also oftentimes lost in the sort of broader context of contract negotiations. And to me, this is a real true injustice, given the absolutely vital work that these educators are doing on behalf of our students every day, and should absolutely receive a living wage, as well as a broader recognition in their compensation of the expertise they have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lena. Our last public speaker is Chris Alberg.
Good evening. My name is Chris Alberg. I'm a Spanish teacher at Newton North High School.
Can you please state your address for the record?
I live at 269 Forest Hill Street in Jamaica Plain.
Thank you.
Many of my colleagues and students and parents have come to you, have spoken more eloquently than I ever could on the status of the current contract negotiations. What I come to you with is questions. How do we get here? I did a little light research. Many of the members of the selected board state either in their campaign information or on their school committee bios that, their capacity for serving on this board is based in their previous experience in things like CPAC, PTSO, Parent Educator Collaborative. The thing that all of those groups have in common is that they all work with the teachers. They all have our backs. And so my question to those of you on this board is, what happened when you won an election that changed that? What happened that after you ran for public office and got elected, you suddenly became antagonistic and against us instead of working with us? My other question, Madam Mayor, is how is it this contract comes up for renewal every 3 years? Every 3 years, and I've been here for a few of these cycles now. You act like it's a surprise, and that there's no money because you're taken by surprise somehow that the contract is expired, and the teachers are yet again asking for a cost of living wage increase. These things are eminently predictable, and I don't understand the surprise. I don't understand why these things can't be planned for in advance, and why we have to go through this charade every 3 or 3.5 years. Thank you.
All right. Thank you to everyone who spoke at public comment. That concludes the period of our public comment period. We very much appreciate hearing your perspective. The public comment period is now closed, and we will move on to the next item on our agenda. We'll give everyone a minute or two to file out. I understand that she'll be joining us around 7:15. I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether she'll be in person or remote. So we'll move on to our consent agenda. We have 3 items this evening on our consent agenda. First, the minutes from the November 20th school committee meeting and the November 20th caucus. Second, there are 6 policy proposals, 5 of which are removals from the policy manual. Those are GA, GCQD, GCQE, GDQC, GDQD, and then a new policy proposal, LBC. And then the third item is international and out-of-state field trips. Does anyone wish to remove an item from our consent agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I motion that we accept the consent agenda.
Thank you, Rajiv. Is there a second?
Second to the motion.
Thank you. We'll take a roll call vote. Ward 1.
Yes.
Ward 2.
Yes.
Ward 3.
Yes.
Ward 4.
Yes.
Ward 5. Yes. Ward 6.
Yes.
Ward 7. Yes. Ward 8 is not present. Mayor Fuller.
Yes.
Right. Thank you, Lisa. The consent agenda passes. And we'll move on to the next posted order of business, which is our superintendent's update.
Good evening.
You, Dr. Nolan.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone. I just wanted to let the school committee know that there were several requests for additional information and analysis in the 11/20 meeting, which included budgetary analysis over a 10-year period, the impact of pandemic on subgroup performance, a follow-up on caseloads. And those are taking a little longer than expected with the Thanksgiving break in the middle. So I will have it for you on the December 18th meeting, if not before that, for the school committee to review. Now on to the update for this week. Under The academic area, lots of parent conferences going on. And I just want to say a thank you to all of the teachers who have completed some in elementary school and middle school and high school are ongoing. I also want to thank all of the teachers who in grade 1 and 2 who are implementing the new EL literacy curriculum. I've been walking in most of the elementary schools, and it's just really nice with some of the school committee members here to observe some of these lessons in action and to see the training really taking hold and the kids telling us about it, and wanting the community to know that with our assistant superintendents, Farag and McCall, we are doing integrity walkthroughs to help assist and make sure that grade 1 is grade 1 is grade 1 everywhere, and that we are seeing the same types of lessons, but also hearing from teachers about what they might need in order to continue to have support in this area. We've completed integrity walks thus far at Ward, Williams, Mason Rice, and Memorial Spalding, and these will be ongoing. I participated in some of the integrity walks myself, and it was really a pleasure to see the high level of expertise of our staff. It was also great to see, while the base curriculum is there, teachers in their special way of doing business, their own pedagogical skill, their own secret sauce, if you will, comes through with those lessons. And so I'm just really pleased with the progress of that work. Talked about conferences and parent collaboration, which has been going very well. We also sent out early literacy screening results to all families per the new Department of Education regulations. I do want to note that Aspen, the student information system into which you would pull your MCAS scores and these literacy results, has been out for the last 3 days. So there's been an outage, and all the students are probably trying to check their grades as well. Sorry, Max. This is not a Newton issue. This is an Aspen issue, and I do believe it has been resolved, but we just wanted to let anyone know that. You can still pull those letters down at any time. Just a word of caution for everyone. This is the first time the Newton Schools has ever done this type of early literacy screening. So lots of things happen when you do something for the first time. Families aren't used to looking at the results. There's not a routine yet based on, when parents have reviewed it and how they want to look at that information with their teacher. And teachers are new to responding to that information. So I would like to ask for grace on behalf of the teachers. They are implementing this mandate from the Department of Ed, and the Department of Ed did not provide commensurate training for the school system. That has come from our literacy specialists. And while we've created a process that we think makes sense, we're also open to feedback from families about how that has been received. Those folks who have kindergarten young people, those notification letters will go out in January. And we hope to learn from this sharing of letters in order to make the kindergarten experience that much stronger. In athletics, I just want to shout out to our championship Newton North Girls Volleyball Division I champs this year, beating arch rivals Barnstable. Lots of pride across the system for that. So congratulations to that winning team. I'm happy to report that the Newton Schools is the recipient of an $82,000 teacher diversification grant. We received similar grants in the past. We've just heard this week that we have been allotted another grant for this year. I'll bring that to you with more detail under a grants acceptance so you can know the specifics. But the Office of DEI and the Human Resources Office work together to attract, retain, and support our educators in many ways. One of the ways that we do that is around specific job roles and groups of educators. And it was our pleasure to send most of our Black male administrators to a Black male educator conference recently using these grant monies in order to do that. The group, I sent you some pictures because it sort of says it all. And these are in the online materials there. This group has come back really energized and supportive with lots of ideas for us in terms of how we may further support our colleagues of color in the Newton School. So we're so grateful to that, and for the leadership of Kathy Lopes, our Director of DEI, who helped make that possible. Lots of training going on this year. Many of us, Newton had the most attendance at the yearly METCO Directors Conference, which honestly is some of the best professional development I go to every year, and I've attended for the last 20 years. We had a huge showing of Newton staff, and there was a particular focus on literacy and the teaching of history in terms of bringing alternative voices to traditional literacy curriculum. It was very timely topic for our district, considering we are going through a deployment of our new science-based reading program, but also attending to the diversity of literature that we put in the hands of our young people. I would love to brag more about our METCO program. We are the largest METCO program in the state. And remember, for those who might be tuning in for the first time, the METCO program is a busing program where students who are Asian, Hispanic, and Black from Boston City can come to a METCO community. Students that we have chose Newton over many other communities in the state to attend, and we are having a community forum to showcase the program and our students on December 6th at 6:30 p.m. at Newton South High School. So please join me. We'll have a student panel. Our leadership will be speaking, some of our METCO staff who are really dynamic individuals. Our METCO director is also training to be a superintendent herself, and she was a large part of the success of the METCO Directors Conference this past week. And finally, a shout out to the technology department who finished a total upgrade of the outdated phone system at the Underwood Elementary School. And we're very pleased to say that they're now online in all the ways that our other schools are online. And that's our update for this week.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nolan. Does anyone have any follow-up questions or comments about one of the topics that Anna addressed? Seeing none, go ahead.
Dr. Nolan, I know we did the literacy screening for the first time. How are we going to learn from the follow-up? Mm-hmm. Because I know the results are potentially, especially for families that whose students possibly didn't make it, didn't get perfect scores, had some issues come up, etc. We need to make sure we're engaging with those families, and then we learn from that process as we go forward. So what do we have in place for that, for this first go around?
So the notice, of course, drives a lot of questions. And so families are getting used to looking at that data for the first time. We are prepared to discuss students who are not meeting our expectations for this time in the year through our child study meetings, which are called the Mass Tiered System of Support, the MTSS type meetings, or child SIT teams here, student intervention teams. So there are mechanisms certainly to bring that forward. And then my question will be to the principals: how will we be deploying resources, time? How will we use the schedule to make sure that those young people receive additional time and support outside of the general education classroom? Now, you've heard me say that this is tricky to do in some of our schools because of the schedule and the staffing. Superintendent McCall and I will be having a meeting with all of the reading specialists shortly to hear their observations about this time period. I'm a little worried that the delay with Aspen has sort of delayed parent responses. So we'll just keep responding as parents come to the forefront. What we did identify, we reviewed the district-wide screening data on last Monday and have been trying to propose what are the mechanisms and the additional supports that we will need to put in place in order to make different changes. One of those changes does lie with our METCO families, where we found a significantly larger impact to those students in terms of their reading acquisition than resident students of color in kindergarten and first grade and second grade. So we need to dip particularly into that group to make some decisions. So we wrote a grant in the summer, Director Gilbert Smith and I, to create parent supports of this nature because we suspected, looking at the MCAS data and other data from the past, that this might be the case. So I'm happy to say that we have funding and a training schedule for working on those issues. And then we're just going to have to keep open to any new ideas that we learn. One of my goals, as you know, from reviewing the goals for this meeting, is that I will actually be studying the teachers who are getting the most growth out of students and who may have the most in terms of our iReady data in grades 1 and 2, to see what are those teachers doing that maybe we could replicate across Newton. So I'm still doing that work. Also, all of the elementary principals were asked to identify students who may be performing below benchmark as their personal case study, led by Assistant Superintendent Barak, And they come together to try to share supports across the district and also to keep an eye on the progress monitoring for those young people. So constantly taking a dipstick on how are they doing each week. So they're taking 3 at a time, but what that means is that within their building, the most fragile learners are front and center at the principal level every week. You're welcome.
Does anyone else have a comment or question? Seeing none, I guess we'll move on to the rest of our posted business. The next item on our agenda is a negotiations update, which I can provide. There are no separate written materials this week. So I can let you all know that we had a 2-hour negotiation session with the NTA this evening, and the school committee increased its COLA offers for all units as part of that negotiation session. In addition, for Unit C, which are our paraprofessionals, we agreed to a proposal that the NTA had originally made. And that proposal in total drops 2 full steps off the bottom of the Unit C salary scale. We had previously agreed to 1.5 of those steps. We've now agreed to the NTA's full proposal on that 2-step reduction. What that means is that salaries for our incoming lowest earning Unit C members will increase, and that's something we're very pleased about. So we have a tentative agreement on that aspect. One of the other changes that the school committee made in its proposal this evening related to COLA proposals with regard to Unit C members. So we proposed this evening paying a higher COLA to those Unit C members who are at the lower end of the salary scale versus at the top end. I think you all recall from past negotiations updates that the top step on our Unit C salary scale is about $10 an hour higher than almost all of our surrounding districts. But we do have work to do on the lower end. So in differentiating our COLA proposal, we emphasized a higher COLA for those on the lower end of that Unit C salary scale. Couple other points. There's some misinformation circulating in the community that the Newton Public Schools' long-standing practice of allowing non-resident teachers to enroll their children in the Newton Public Schools is in jeopardy or is being removed. It is not. That is a program that the school committee remains committed to. Instead, what we've proposed are some modest changes to the mechanism of how that program would work. And 3 more updates, sorry. Just to let you know, the NPS, effective December 1st, just increased all of its Unit A, B, and E employees' salaries with their annual step increases. And for employees in those units, that means those employees are getting about on an average of 4% salary increase. For those employees in our Unit C and D, their salaries were increased on their step date, which is September 1st. And so on September 1st, the average for our Unit C and D employees was about a 6% salary increase. So despite the fact that we do not have a contract in place for this fiscal year, NPS is paying step increases to its employees. One update from our last meeting, we are making some corrections and improvements to the data that we had previously published about Weston's Unit C salaries. We've gotten some updated information, and so we're going to get those corrections made and updated on our website pretty soon. And then the last thing is that we are meeting again to negotiate with the NTA on December 18th, which is in 2 weeks. So that's it. Any questions or comments from the members? Rajiv?
I'm pleased to hear about the focus on Unit C. Certainly, I feel like there's a significant discrepancy between those who are stepping and the top step. And it sounds like what we have a tentative agreement on will certainly help to address that. So it's good to hear. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Oh, Tamika, sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
No worries. Thanks, Kathy. I just wanted to reiterate a point that can't be stressed enough, which is that by reaching tentative agreements while putting forward package proposals that seek to capture the total cost of the proposals, that demonstrates that the school committee is continuously operating under good faith to put forward an agreement that would be mutually beneficial to both parties. So thanks for giving the update. Wanted to make sure that was stressed.
Thanks, Tamika. Anybody else? Questions, comments on him?
Yeah, thanks. Tamika mentioned that tentative agreement. Could you elaborate a bit more on that?
Sure. So as part of negotiations, we talk about a whole variety of topics over the period of negotiations. And we have a ground rule with the NTA that essentially nothing's done till everything is done. But when one of the sides makes a proposal and we reach some agreement about that specific proposal, the parties can then say they have a tentative agreement on that topic. So it's basically like if you were negotiating 10 subjects and you reached more or less consensus on 5 of them, you would know that you no longer had to keep discussing those 5 subjects because you have tentative agreements. Then you keep discussing the other 5 where you haven't reached those agreements. Does that make sense to you?
Okay, that's good to explain, because otherwise I'm thinking about overall package tentative agreement. That sounds big news, and now only part of it.
Well, so we've had, I mean, it's not new that we've reached tentative agreements. We've been reaching tentative agreements on various topics for months and months. Right. I don't know how many topics on which we have tentative agreements, but I'd say it's somewhere between, Tamika, Paul, 5 and 10, maybe even more than that. I mean, we've been reaching these tentative agreements over time.
Okay. And
does that make sense?
Possible how many items we're talking about?
I don't know that I can give you a total. I mean, I think the school committee for each unit made something on the order of, I don't want to give you a precise number.
Okay, well,
I'm going to guesstimate somewhere around 15 to 20 proposals per unit. I think overall the NTA has made 35 to 40 proposals combined. So if you added all of those things up, those are the number of potential topics or potential proposals. Does that help you?
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Okay. So let's move on to the system-wide goals update. Superintendent, are you going to lead that presentation?
Yes. Thank you. So I tried to take the goals for the 1-year plan and color code them in a way that you could eyeball the progress of the district. And in some places, there are memos from each department that detail more specific information about the accomplishments. This seemed like the cleanest way for you to benchmark some progress and also to know the reality of some of the challenges that we're facing to complete this. So if the public is interested in looking at this document, it's our 1-year goals, and they're color-coded: green for already done or mostly done, yellow for in process, and red for most likely will not be able to be achieved this year for a variety of reasons. And I tried to just give context. In addition, there are hyperlinks as pieces of evidence so the school committee can determine to what degree we have achieved those items by the end of the year. We hope to have those deliverables, if you will, that we said we would do at the beginning of the year to indicate how we would achieve this goal. So this just serves as a mid-year, or a third of the year approximately has gone by. This is both for the evaluation of the district's progress and also the superintendent's personal goals and evaluation, which you'll have to do shortly. And just also to let you know that there were certain things, given our current dynamics within the district, that I just want to be realistic, may be quite delayed or unable to be achieved this year. So just wanted to let you know that up front. And I think the best way is if people have specific questions about this, but I'm very pleased with the team's progress so far. We're only a third of the year, third through the year, and you can see a lot of green and yellow is already moving through all of the goals. It's great energy in the team. We had a pretty productive meeting this morning. I felt like this morning, I thought we are, such as the weird circumstances around us, we have hit a groove, and people are really working together to make sure the best for Newton's kids. My own personal goals, now that I've finished the entry plan, I'll start shadowing students, and I will start studying the bright spot teachers so that we can start to understand more about the experience of the Newton Public Schools, but also design processes, just like the question Rajiv just asked. So what are we going to do about some of these challenges that students face? So that's sort of how I designed this second 2/3 of my superintendent research. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have here. We have, of course, this evening, Dr. Joanny Santa is going to show the human resources entry plan. So that's a really big deliverable for us in a lot of areas that has overlap with retention, recruitment, diversity, and how we train and onboard our staff. So it's really a big portion of our plan. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions or comments from the members? Chris?
So if you could just elaborate a little bit on the goal for the district planning and budget ecosystem and where we stand. A lot of these things I can see the very direct relationship of, how certain, work rule actions are inhibiting that. And I guess, can you maybe just elaborate on
Sure.
So what's holding us up there and how we can continue to move forward, even if not 100%?
So the entry planning process yields us some areas for future district planning and budgeting. So we are not without some tools in order to do that. What we aren't able to do right now is to hold the profile of a graduate public stakeholder process on the same timeline that we had originally planned. We would have been starting right in the beginning of January. Instead, we have asked the folks that do the profile of a graduate to do 2 public sessions, one at each high school, on the future of work and jobs, so that we can start to set the scene for how we might do the profile of a graduate process later. I can't imagine doing the profile of a graduate process, nor should we, without our teaching force with us. So we can layer that into our planning process when the time comes to be able to do that. You still have the information from the entry planning process before that I just completed, and we can set additional goals and begin a strategic planning process in that way. We're just missing that vision and mission portion that I think we all want to uplift the community with. What do we want for our kids in the future? And what is that exciting vision and dream that we have for the school system that would be the growing medium, if you will, around the strategic plan? We can certainly solve problems and still write a strategic plan, but you had asked me to put together that type of vision, mission, and a long-range planning process, and I can't do that without teacher voices in the room. Now, some districts go through the process and they have had similar stalled contract negotiations, longer contract negotiations, and some of those district superintendents have indicated that they conduct the process and then they go to the teachers for like final call. I just don't think that would work for us. And I don't know. I just think they're key in terms of understanding what our young people need, and we want them with us during that process. So we're still going to get some plans out of it. We're going to get even better plans once we've gone through this process.
Max?
Like I tend to do, I don't really necessarily have a question, more of a statement. I don't really necessarily have a position on this, but I just feel like my role as a student ambassador is to talk about the things that students care about, that students are talking about. So I was just looking at the creating a culturally responsive, rigorous instruction for all goal. And the one thing that I've seen a lot of recently, again, I don't really know what the solution is. I don't really need an answer. Just wanted to bring it to the committee's attention, is some students have been unhappy with the fact that our school doesn't, oftentimes when something big happens in the world, the history teachers will often do a short lesson about it to get us up to speed, and we'll talk about it. And some people find that very helpful. Other people find it traumatizing. And I think there's a little bit of student, unhappiness over the fact that the history department hasn't done anything about the Israel-Hamas conflict. And so some students are very kind of happy that that's happening because it would be traumatic for them to speak about it in class, and other students are really passionate and feel like it should be a topic of discussion. So I'm not really sure what the solution is, but I just wanted to bring that to the committee's attention. So that's an issue.
You have just summed up the current superintendent role exactly. I joined my colleagues in Needham and Brookline for a story with WGBH on this very topic. So we're very aligned with other districts across the world right now who are struggling with this same scenario. So how we've tried to approach it is to make those smaller places for people who do want to have that conversation available. But just as you said, every support or lack of support along this continuum has been met with mixed, depending on who you are in the system, you could love that moment or dislike that moment deeply. So we're trying to be everyone's public school and make sure that our values are clear, and that support of young people is clear. So we've had our, trusted adult check-ins, small groups, win blocks, all of those pieces. I did schedule myself at your suggestion into both student leadership groups during win block. So I'm on your schedule soon. And I did meet with my student advisory at length to gain some feedback about, what students are needing. I think principals are staying pretty close to students. And I would even say at the elementary schools, this same conversation has been brought up through students. So we're staying close and trying to provide as much support without creating disruption or harm.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question or comment for our superintendent?
Yes.
Something?
Again, when I reviewed this entry plan, I was still impressed that so many tasks and some are really urgently needed, and many committee members have talked about that. And current environment's a little bit challenging, unfortunately, but you're still, working hard to move ahead. Here on page 5, I'm a little bit curious about the first one, the first bullet point, success measures. A centralized communication portal that will allow families and the large Newton community to stay informed, and connected, and engaged with districts. So since we have parents here and the community members here, so would you elaborate a little bit more about this so people will be better informed?
I'm happy to. This is in pilot format starting in January, led by Julie McDonough, our communications director. So there is a memo detailing the status of this a little lower down on page 5. It's a blue link. What you'll find there is that we are looking to make it easier for families to go to one place to receive all updates from the parent-teacher organizations, from each of their schools and athletics. Because right now, if you have more than one child in this school, you are getting a lot of email from us. I see a bunch of moms nodding in the back. So we just want people to go to one place. They can schedule it to receive it in their home language. So if you want to receive it in Italian, you just click Italian and you get it. And you can also decide when you get it. So if you're that person who does all your stuff on Sunday nights and you want to schedule, to receive everything on Sunday morning so it's ready for you, you get to control how you interact with the community. What we'll also be testing in this is it's mostly for principals to use, right? So that they can test how can we communicate more effectively with families. All forms can be given out and accepted through that. So there's the one-stop shopping. You go to this one place, you do all your business. It links to the online payments. It links to everything. So just trying to make it that much easier. It also can text you, it can call you, it can email you. You choose how you like to be notified. A lot of our families prefer text-based notification. And I'm happy to tell you that I actually am a parent in a district that has just started using this also. It was an accident. I had nothing to do with it. But so I'm testing it as a parent now as well. And it has completely reduced the scatter for me in terms of trying to follow all the things that my daughter's involved with and all the clubs and all the things. So that'll start shortly, so that we will pilot it with the principals who are going to take it on in January, with an eye towards, if it goes well and the technology department, the communications department, and families give us a good review, that we would seek to implement it instead of the tools we are using now.
Wonderful. Just quickly, this is one way or two ways, so parents can, community members can share their views using this portal or not?
So there are different aspects to the tool. This is the first thing we're going to pilot, is just how we push out information. But there is a way to communicate through that portal.
Thanks.
Of course, I can't find it now. Hopefully you'll know immediately what I'm
Okay.
talking about. So one of the things that I greatly appreciated, and I just want to share publicly because I thought it was an amazing memo and it answered a lot of questions that I think a number of us have had, and parents and people in the community, which was a wonderful memo that was written by Dr. Katie Hogue about the outside vendor tool that we're using in order to create the dashboards that we've been talking about for a while now. And so would strongly suggest that if people here didn't have a chance to click through to it, and also to the public click through on this document, it's definitely worth a read. Very interesting to see where we are right now. And I know that we're early in the process, but the work that they have done is amazing so far. I mean, I haven't physically seen it, but the descriptions make it seem like we're doing great work moving forward in that process. So where was it?
Thank you. It is on page 9.
Page 9. There we go.
And we are using it in our internal conversations now. So the reason I could answer Rajiv's question is because I have been in all of those tools and learning about it, learning how to use them well. So thank you. If I may, Madam Chair, just share with you that also on page 7, just because I know it's come up a lot within the community, a memo from Assistant Superintendent Casey Miller, a memo detailing the MTSS school steering committee work, but also she has a second memo that is detailing the implementation of the thematic disability awareness curriculum that is well underway in terms of creation. So I'm going to have to find that page for you.
Page 4.
Yep. Page 4, the anti-ableist curriculum there. I just want to reassure folks that we have heard the feedback from the community worrying about how this would be implemented and at what speed, and we have put all resources and time towards it to accelerate that process, and to do that in a conjunction with our MTSS work and that new data dashboard that we're looking at, so that we are thinking about what are the most intense needs in the district, what needs a curriculum fix, what needs an intervention fix, and what needs a communication fix. So I really do thank everyone for their ongoing feedback there. We're not finished, but we have made some really good progress.
Any other comments or questions? Before we move on to our next topic, I just want to thank you and your team very much. I mean, this is an incredible amount of work and energy that you've brought to these goals, and it's a great start.
Yeah.
We will revisit them again as the year progresses.
Very proud of the team as a whole.
So our next item of business is a human resources update and our entry plan from Dr. Joanny Santa, who is joining us in the school committee chamber. Welcome, Dr. Santa. Thank you.
Speaking of proud, I am so proud of Joanny and the work that she's doing here to help us set up systems and procedures for human resources, which she'll tell you all about.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. Is this going to move itself? Okay. First order of business is to first thank you for this opportunity to be here today. I have been in for 5 months now, 5 complete months, and it has been a very welcoming, great place to work. All the work, no matter how difficult it becomes, is exciting because I have really great colleagues who band together to solve problems, both on the building level as well as in central office. And that includes everyone that I've been working with, teachers, teacher assistants, the principals, the department heads, everyone. When it comes to this entry plan, I do have to say you have your plans and then you have what happens, right? And so having experience in different districts, I really try to be super open around what I know are the functions of a human resources department in a school district and how we do things here in Newton and what we may want to continue to do the same, what we may need to adjust, and what we may need to create in order to meet all of our goals. And so I look at this work as the work that connects with the policies that you make and the goals that you want to see in the Newton Public Schools come to fruition. I am concentrating specifically on the high priority areas of recruitment, retention, support, onboarding, licensure, and website development. All of these things interconnect in one way or another. So in true transparency, I will tell you there are times that I started running in one direction and had to pause. The team came together with background information, also things that they've wanted to do in the system for a while. And we've had to make mid-course corrections or adjustments and then continue on. And I suspect that it will be that way for a bit. Under recruitment, it's critical. It's the critical component of any successful HR plan is who you have working in the district. And so we need to develop a comprehensive recruitment plan that includes all the different ways we recruit in 2023. And not only in 2023, but post the pandemic as well, where a lot of in-person job fairs are not widely attended. So we need to have a mix of in-person, virtual. Our employees are an amazing source of contact. We have professionals in our workforce that we haven't asked, what kind of associations should we be posting at? We need a social media presence. And for that, hopefully I'll get some assistance from some students that Dr. Nolan has tapped into in order to get our postings far and wide. That's how you really help to diversify your workforce and be more inclusive, is to get the postings out in front of a diverse group of people far and wide to know what we're doing here in Newton, what we're looking for, and to make a match with their skill sets. One of the things I want to point out is that last bullet. We've made a lot of progress. This is one of those areas where I had to stop and kind of handle the scaffolding around recruiting. And so we've made a few website improvements. We'll continue to develop those. Retraining on applicant tracking system that we use. I'm new. This isn't one that I've used before. And so we took advantage in the entire HR department responsible for recruiting and applicant tracking. We've been going through the training soup to nuts and making adjustments to that process. An in-house virtual fair will be taking place this week, which I'm super excited about. We'll work out the kinks and continue to do more and more of those. When it comes to retention, and also recruitment, I will be focusing in on identifying the metrics that we need to use to be able to know if our efforts are actually working. And so with retention, having top talent is super important. It's part of the recruitment process. But it also, at least for me as an HR director, it's really important that we have a system system and schools that can support our recruits so that our recruits stay and that their investment in us and our investment in them pays off over time. And so we looked at getting regular feedback from employees around their experience, improve anything that we can improve, and address any other concerns that they have. We've begun to address supporting mentoring and induction needs with the Office of Teaching and Learning. And so I met with Allison Tarbell and need to dive a little deeper on what it looks like to support the different kinds of people who become educators. We have fresh out of college, we have career changers, we have folks who've come in from other states and other countries. So we want to be really thoughtful on what kind of support do different educators need as they come into our system. And then in collaboration with the district's DEI and teaching and learning departments, we'll have access, our employees will have access to different kinds of supports, either a support group or affinity groups, what they need in order to be successful at working with our young people in the schools at the end of the day. Support can come in many ways. I think right now we're doing a lot of call and response, right? So somebody reaches out and calls or needs some kind of assistance and we jump in to help them out. But I like to look at systems and drill down to the heart of a problem. If one or two or three people have an issue, we may need to look at what's the nexus of that and how do we address it so it doesn't continue to become a problem. And for that, we're going to need to have interviews, exit interviews, stay interviews at some point to find out the reasons why people may be leaving. I understand that people leave districts for different reasons. Some it's the state, some it's for another opportunity that they are looking into. But I always say I want them not to want to leave, right? If you have to move out of state, I totally understand, but I want you not to. I want it to feel bad. You didn't want to leave us. And so that's something that we need to work on. Working, what do I have here? Working side by side with all of my amazing colleagues, the assistant superintendents, the different directors, the department heads in Unit B have all provided really great nuggets of information to help us build a support network that will work for our employees. Onboarding and licensure. So I found out a lot of things. One is that our HR onboarding, shout out to the crew in HR. They do amazing work, Lions work. It's a grind. No one would know it on the other side. But we do need to be more efficient at how we are doing that. And everyone in the department is looking through that lens, and we're looking at all of our functions to see how can we be more efficient? How can we be more effective? And then I've also identified that we need a very specific building level onboarding. We need to know what that workflow is on the building level. So when they leave HR's onboarding process, it picks up at the building level, and to make sure that that's seamless so that their support is really tight. We're still identifying the vital areas in terms of what that would look like, but in 5 months, we've made some progress in identifying here and there some of the things that would make onboarding at the school level that much tighter, and onboarding at our level just as tight. We provide support for new employees seeking licensure. Sometimes we are hiring people who are career changers or who have a background in education, but perhaps in a private school where they didn't need licensure and they now need to secure it. So being able to take them through that process in an effective and efficient way. I'm starting to pull in building level administrators into those conversations to build their skill sets in that area as well, for the amount of support that onboarding someone on the building level will take around licensure. And our goal is to ensure that all of the employees have what they need, all their necessary resources in order to do their job as effectively as possible. And then the website development. I'm a little bit of an egghead, so I love all the technology stuff. We needed to jazz up the website a little bit. It still needs some work. One of the analogies I like to use is, birthday cake is great, but you don't want to eat it in one big bite, right? You're going to choke. So we're trying to take it one bite at a time as much as we possibly can. But I do know what our priorities are, and I do know when we can essentially step in and start to mold what supports in HR look like, what the website in terms of recruitment looks like and accessing information, what our onboarding looks like, what our licensure support looks like, and what our support in general around support groups and affinity. So I just wanted to give you a taste of where it's going. It's 5 months in, so it's still in its infancy. I look forward to coming back in the spring with a lot more information on how this is come into full focus. But if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. We do plan to monitor and follow up, especially on our compliance. And also there's a saying, I think most of you know, my background is also as a building administrator, as a principal. And the saying is, what gets monitored gets done. So we want to make sure to have really tight monitoring of the systems we put in place so that everyone can speak to it intelligently, everyone's actually implementing it, and that they're giving feedback on what might need to be adjusted as we continue to move on. And lastly, I wanted to kind of explain a little bit of what my 30, 60, 90 days has looked like. In the beginning, it was just really learning the system. How do we hire here, on board, off board, mentor, recruitment, the unspoken rules, everybody's name, what they do, where they work, where the bathrooms are, all of that good stuff. Midway through, around 60 days or so, at that point, I was getting my hands dirty too. I know how to do the job. So getting my hands dirty in with the crew, you learn best by doing. So I wanted opportunities to meet with Unit B, meet with teachers, TAs. What does our substitute pool look like? How does Precision connect with us? And they're our substitute provider, and they've been pretty amazing at upping the game for this year. Identifying what some root causes of issues are, and if we can do anything about those root issues, and which are the priority issues and which can wait a little bit so we don't choke. And then ongoing, I can't see it on my screen, I don't want to mess up here. Develop the action plans, and that's what's happening right now. We're more in that world right now, is to develop these action plans and provide professional development to everyone who has a hand in hiring and supporting our new hires and our current staff, and being able to take in that feedback to make sure that it has enough Newton flavor of what we need it to look like now. So she wrote.
I just want to thank you again. Just one small tidbit, one line on there, increase the substitute pool. So since Joanna came on, there's been a 58% increase in the amount of substitutes available in the district. That's pretty amazing data. That's just one data point, which obviously, we had a lot of concerns about class coverages. And so that was one of those hot issues that she got right on. And I could name 10 others that have been similarly solved in a more positive way. So I'm really grateful for the hard work. And I think we're just seeing the beginning of some really great human resources support. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do my colleagues have any questions or comments for Dr. Santa? Anping?
Let me start. Thank you very much. And I know this is not easy time to start the work here with a lot of issues. And now let me ask a specific question, and probably this will test your knowledge. I hope I'm not being too specific. I heard that traditionally our Newton school system's retention rate is very high, above 90. That's what I heard a few years back. Now with all things going on now, and we heard some, anecdotes, People are leaving and for whatever reason. So do you happen to have some current data to share with us about?
I don't have concrete data to share with you right now, but I would be happy to follow up with concrete data for you. But I can say that when people leave us and they're offboarding, they have to go through human resources, right? We have to know you're leaving. And I am not finding that people are leaving because of any strife in the district or unhappiness with the district. In my short time here, what I have experienced are people having to leave for job, their partners are working in other states. And so because of that, they have to move, or they don't tell us the reason, but they are moving out of state. I've had a few people who have taken some leaves of absences to take care of personal issues that they have going on and couldn't be fully present in the school, and for their students and colleagues. And so I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I think the superintendent would be the first person to know if I was starting to see that people were leaving because they felt some kind of distress at school. That's not what I'm experiencing. We will go through a more formal process to find out how they feel about working here, and finding out what kinds of supports we can put in place if needed. What I am finding is that if there are any issues, people are wanting to have those issues resolved. And so I'm impressed by that. It's not everybody who wants to step forward and say, you know, I'm having a hard time and this is it, and are willing to engage in a restorative process in order to continue to work and be happy in the district. I'm very impressed by that. I think it's healthy in a work environment to have a culture where if you disagree, you're willing to sit at the table and talk about it, make amends and move on and clear the air. And that's what I've found more than anything.
Thanks very much. And as you know, and we all know that this retention data probably at this moment is very, very meaningful and critical for us to think about, you know, our budget and all other programs issues. And again, if you have a chance or your team has a chance, and I think it will be nice to have that data. I don't know how soon you can get it. Oh, by the way, do we still have the exit interview for every staff who leaves the system?
We do not. And then so that's something that we're on, is working on an exit interview for everyone who leaves. We may be able to capture people who've already left. We have ways to communicate with them to see if they would voluntarily provide that information. It's volunteer regardless, right? So whether you're still with us and planning on leaving, you have to volunteer to do that for us. But if they've left in this year or last year, I think I can reach back out and ask them to provide some information for us. That is on my radar to do.
Thank you. And we all know that that kind of data will be very meaningful
very much
when we analyze, you know, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years to see if any change, what kind of change, what kind of trend, which will help us to do a better job, you know, at the school committee level, at the building level, and, you know, for all the administrations to be aware of what kind of things going on, why people leaving, what kind of, you know, primary factors impacting their departure.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to add to that, on Ping, that without that systematic history of exit interviews, we find it hard to understand the trend ourselves. So there's, you know, we've had some discussions with the Parent Educator Collaborative about who left last year. That number you heard about, the NECP staff losing like a certain 11% of their staff. So there's a lot to those conversations. So for example, you know, I always say people leave for love, babies, and, you know, promotions, right? So like there's a lot of love, baby, and promotion moves. And then, you know, we're trying to get at, is there anything fundamentally happening in the Newton schools, you know, that is really a deal breaker. So we are monitoring for that too. And if you remember in the entry plan that I wrote, there's a lot of churn though. So for example, if we're all third grade teachers and Kathy gets the call for love to move to another state and Rajiv's a first grade teacher in the same building and he says, ooh, I want to be a third grade teacher now. So the principals will tend to try to do that, which creates like this class had a transition and then this class had a transition. And then that is a double load on all the other teachers in that school. So we're just trying to explore those things because those are hidden burdens that then the grade level team has to onboard a new person mid-year. You know, and imagine if you're doing that while you're doing parent conferences and report cards and the whole, you know, so we're just trying to detect that kind of pattern. So the retention rate that from DESE will not be available till next fall. So if you're looking for that parallel data, it won't come till the fall.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Rajiv and then Tamika and then Paul.
First, thank you very much for the systematic approach to the entry plan. It's great to see. It's nice to see the longer term thinking along with getting your hands dirty and getting things done. I have a number of very quick comments. Certainly, Joanne, do not expect you to be able to respond to them.
Okay.
But just some thoughts as you went through this.
Okay.
So on recruitment, and this aligns, I think, somewhat with what Anping was asking. The setting the context is really helpful because I've had people say to me, well, you know, we have 30 openings in Newton, and well, in the context of 2,000 teachers, that's not necessarily an outrageously large number. Like you'd expect it in terms of normal churn, why people would be leaving. So I think when we think about the data, I think some of that context is always going to be helpful.
Okay.
The other also is we're in a competition for talent. We obviously want to expand the pool. In situations where it would be good to know if we're losing a lot of or some number of good teachers to another district in Metro West. I'm not saying we're going to be directly competing or looking at that, but it would also be helpful to understand. Are we seeing an unexpectedly large group of people, of our treasured employees leaving to go to a particular destination. The other thing, retention, I'm very glad you're tracking that. Just our success. I know we're putting effort into it. We're putting dollars and time into it. And we need to make sure we're doing a good job, especially when it comes to diverse hires, when it comes to new employees, people right out of college. The people who need that support would be great to see. One other question is on support for our staff in terms of the EAP. So what we're hearing across the board for our students is that the case rate, the caseloads for our support teams internally, from the guidance counselors, psychologists, and so on, are really high. Are we seeing the same thing for EAP for our teachers and other employees? Essentially, I would boil that down to, are we still able to provide the levels of mental health support and social emotional support for our employees that we should be? And what I'm hearing in industry, because I do work in a related field, is that it's challenging right now. And again, how are we doing would be good to understand.
Can I speak to that for a second?
Please.
So the Employee Assistance Program, that's what EAP stands for. They have been amazingly responsive anytime I've had to call them because we had concerns around the needs of one of our employees. And our principals are doing a really great job too of helping that individual make that initial call, because that's essentially where we end up finding ourselves not being able to really get the benefit of EAP, is when you actually have to pick up the phone and make that call. And if you're in distress, that sometimes you can't even articulate what you need or want, or you don't even know. And so we've been really thoughtful around the approach of having, I don't have the relationship with the staff in that way, but the principals do. And they do sit with a person who might be struggling to make that initial call, or to say, you know, do you want me to get you started, and then walk out of the room. And so I'm hoping that the approach of really taking advantage of our employee assistance program by helping to be that bridge that connects, because that's, for me, it's always about drilling down to the heart of the problem. So why isn't anybody, like, why aren't people calling EAP as often as they should? Well, because that first call is hard. So how do we help make that first call happen? And so, you know, I'd have to do an analysis to see how many people accessed EAP last year, month to month, and compare it to this one. And since you asked, I will to see how that's going. But that's how you would be able to gauge something like that. What's the average in terms of usage, and is it the same or less or more?
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
All right. Go ahead, Tamika, then.
Thanks, Kathy. So I agree entirely with the points that have already been made regarding retention rates and mapping that data, as well as the importance of the exit interview. So I'm really happy that that's moving forward. It's been a bit of opacity around that issue for a number of years. And so it's good that we're going to be doing that work, capturing that data. I wanted to just take a moment to publicly thank Jelani for not only this comprehensive report, but I've gotten to observe firsthand through several of our negotiating subcommittees just how in-depth your knowledge is, and how you are laser-like focused on implementing best practices and delving right in. And I think it's really wonderful that in your 5 months here, you've really done so much work around improving our processes and making sure that our staff are supported, but also just, you know, really being very deliberate in the thoughtful approach to some of the HR strategies you're putting in place. So I thank you for that.
Paul, did you want to ask some questions?
No, I just want to pile on in a positive way, Kathy. Joanne, it's a wonderful presentation. I think we all understand that the quality and the efficacy of what we offer to our students depends so much on the opportunities we provide to our staff for personal and professional development. And to me, what you've laid out is a wonderful combination of a systematic approach to those issues, but ultimately tied to a highly individualistic or individualized approach for what each staff member needs and wants for their own personal and professional development. We often talk about giving each student what each student needs. And it seems to me you're offering us the foundation for providing each staff member with what that person needs. So I just want to say, I think it's a wonderful presentation. I add my compliments for having seen you in action, and we're looking forward to great things.
Thank you. Thank you to each of you. And I'm from Newton now, so. Am I all set?
Chris, you've got an addition.
I have a question.
Sure.
Can you just comment a little bit on your success in increasing the substitute pool, and just maybe what your initial thoughts are in addressing the issue that was listed right on top of it in terms of time and attendance?
Yeah, so it's twofold. In order to really impact substitute issue, we really need to impact why we need a substitute to begin with. And so early on, NTA leadership and Unit B and some principals, we had a meeting to discuss what are the major concerns around time and attendance and what are the needs. And so we really needed to work on making sure that the 180 days that students are in school, everyone who is, particularly those who work with kids who are in front of them, are there too. And obviously people get sick or their family gets sick, and there are other reasons why you would legitimately be out of work for the day. But we wanted to make sure that those situations were essentially the outlier and not the norm, right? That we have folks who have really strong attendance as well as our students. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say, I don't stop thinking with my principal brain. It just, I did it for too long. It's what I think, it's what I, and in that brain, I think to myself, first thing, kids, they do not want a substitute. That they cringe at the thought that, oh, I'd be coming into my class and I've got a substitute. That doubles for students with needs. They'll tell that is the worst day if they know they're getting a substitute. So it's really, really important for us to have quality substitutes so they don't, so at least it's good. And two, that we don't need them as much. So we're trying to make sure that folks are really thoughtful about being in school every day that the students are in school, as long as you're healthy and you can be there, and leave those personal times that you have to be out for exceptional circumstances. Two, working with Precision, and I have to, Sandra Andrade has been great. She's the executive director of Precision. That's who supplies substitutes for us. And she has looked everywhere, high and low, and vetted them really well. Our staff has been great. Every time I send out an SOS, if anybody, knows of folks who you would want to see in front of our students, both staff and families, Julie McDonough has sent it out to families as well. And we get really great referrals in that way, and then onboarding them quickly to get them into the school. So that's one of the ways that we've been able to do that. And then to be flexible around if they need help with transportation, Sandra makes sure they're at a school that can access public transportation in a way that's easy. So really looking at the things that were obstacles for us to be able to get qualified substitutes on our roster working at our schools. If I told you that we're like all set, I'd be, not transparent. And I want to be transparent. We're not all set. We still have a handful of priority schools that we're trying to continue to get substitutes assigned to them. One of the issues with those schools is where they're located in Newton. They're not as easily accessible through public transportation. And as a commuter, where it takes an ungodly amount of time to get to work every day, I kind of understand the need for the substitute because they don't want to show up late. But, we're having a public transit issue, which then becomes a roadway issue in terms of being able to get through the city in a good amount of time. I've floated the idea to Lisa Gilbert-Smith, METCO, around allowing substitutes on the elementary level, either college, if they have work study, to get a ride into Newton on the elementary METCO buses that have space. That actually ups the level of supervision on the bus, and it gives them a ride in and on time. So we'll be hitting that hard once we have colleges on board. Plus, most of the college students don't have cars in the city of Boston. So getting into Newton is something that I've had to start thinking about. Well, how do we fix that? How do we get them here? And the METCO buses. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Max?
Just a quick question about how the substitute program would work in the future. I think currently, you have a substitute if your teacher is out for something like if they're on maternity leave, something like that. But on day to day, if your history teacher is out sick or something else, or even for a week and a half, usually you just kind of don't have class. Is that going to change, or is that not part of the plan?
We are working on that. You know, it's a hard nut to crack, but I like those nuts. Like, I'm on it. We try to offer some substitutes to both North and South. I believe that they're already on and working there and used if someone has to be out for consecutive days. But the bigger nut to crack is that I'm out just today, right? And I'm in tomorrow. And then we're trying really hard for two things. One, for your classes not to be canceled, but two, for you to have quality instruction, right? So I'm not, again, I put my principal hat on. I'm not foolish enough to think that just because we have a substitute in there, you're getting AP calculus class today. That's not, that's a needle in a needle stack. The idea that we could get a substitute that understands or is licensed in AP calculus it's not gonna happen. Okay, so I'm just trying to be really thoughtful and putting my head together with the principals of the school to think about how can we manage that situation? Because it's a tough one, I have to tell you that, of how do we, it's a rotating schedule, how do we get licensed folks to be able to come in and cover for someone during 1 or 2 days of absence without learning loss for you? I don't have an answer to that.
Oh, yeah,
but I know what the question is. And I think that's a big one, right? At least to understand the scope of the problem. The little bit we were able to do is just to make sure that Precision can send each one of the high schools some substitutes to be able to handle the consecutive day absences, which is still important, especially with COVID and RSV and the flu. People are out for consecutive days, and that's when they would plug them in.
That makes a lot of sense.
Trying.
Thank you.
Trying.
And just one piece, you should know, there are a bunch of ways to try to deal with this, and we're talking with the principals about them. Some may be a good fit that other districts use, some may not. So for example, your one-to-one at the high school in terms of technology, there's plenty of ways to create flipped lessons if people are going to be out for a period of time. But also the school committee, before I got here, negotiated to be able to pay in one of those TAs, those tentative agreements, to pay other staff to take on. So certified calculus teachers helping other certified calculus teachers, because the schedule does swap and I may be off on a time when, so in most districts, staff teach 5 sections out of 5. In Newton, they teach 4 out of 5. So there are additional free periods compared to other districts that could help with those matches. But we want to, obviously, they're giving up preparatory time, so we need to compensate them for that.
Thank you.
Unping.
Thank you. Max, thanks for asking that question and that tough nut to crack.
Yeah.
Let me push a little bit further, because once I heard a parent told me, my kid like high school, except miss so many classes because teacher absence for many reasons. And I felt a little bit, disappointed that otherwise high school experience could be good. I don't know if this question for you or for Matt. Probably I start with Matt since you asked a question. This school year, how many classes have you missed because teacher absence? And how many the classroom teacher was absent, but someone was filled in? So give me some sense, so at least I can think about that issue.
As far as my experience goes, and it might be different because I have taken a lot of classes that are more AP or honors, so it might be more difficult to find substitutes in those areas. My English teacher is on maternity leave, and we've had a fantastic substitute that has been really great for the past however many months it's been. As far as day-to-day absences, I've seen actually quite a lot. It's pretty frequent to say maybe 1 or 2 every 2 weeks. One of the teachers is absent on one of the days. I think there has been 1 week where one teacher has been out for the whole week. I personally, in my classes, have never had a substitute for just a week or just 2 weeks or just 1 day. But I do have friends that have had that experience in the past. I personally just end up getting the block free and go home.
So you had no problem but okay. Joanna, could you add a little bit from the district level? Any your thoughts or input regarding?
So exactly
Absolutely.
what Max described is what I have heard and I have experienced in terms of, why it's an issue, why it's something that we really do need to continue to focus on and look for different ways to address. It's not acceptable to have students on any kind of regular basis have their classes canceled. They're getting ready for college or work outside of after, post-secondary education. And so we want to make sure that they're set up to be successful. And some of those individuals may even want to become teachers, right? And so we have to set them up for success. And, I don't know the exact number, but we are having quite a difficult time, not only in the state of Massachusetts, but across the country with student attendance. So if you couple student absences with teacher absences, I worry about whether or not our students are going to be properly prepared, right? Because that's like a little bit of a perfect storm. So it is a problem that we recognize as important. It is a problem that as educators, we want to make sure that we're addressing. And, hiring, just to give you a global look at how we need to look at our hiring. So prior to the pandemic, even the commissioner put out notification to all districts that in the mid to late 90s, when there was a huge push in Massachusetts for licensed teachers, and we had many people going into education and changing careers, those folks have started to retire right around 2017. And so in waves, because they hit their 30 years. So they started retiring in waves. And then the pandemic and the Great Resignation, right? And so that perfect storm also impacts how many people are actually going into education as well. And when people go into education and they're young educators coming in, they go out on maternity leave, right? And so we have to be really creative and thoughtful about how do we manage to provide consistent education, 180 days for students, knowing we have such a mixed bag in terms of new educators starting their families in their lives, if that's the direction they're going in, and then the ones who are retiring. And we have a whole lot more of those in the middle right now because of all of the folks who retired in 16, 17, 18. 19, we started to see it kind of plateau a little bit, and then, the whole world went inside out with the pandemic. And so we're left in this situation where we really need to be thoughtful and creative about what does our district look like now? What are we recruiting in? How are we supporting folks so that maternity leaves, which everybody has a right to expand their family, but what does that mean for the students? What grade are you in, 11? 12th grade. What does that mean for them when they are getting ready to go to college and they haven't had consistent teacher in their AP class? That weighs on me. I think about it a lot.
I'm very concerned about this issue. So just the data that you seek is we cancel about 30 classes a day at each high school. So now that there are 193 teachers at North and 158 at South. So I have these panicked Friday calls with Joannie, like, hey, can you run the attendance? Because it seems like I'm seeing all the attendance sheets come. And we're also wondering, just you're all asking the question, about mental health and, kids' mental health. And we know there's an absentee issue across the nation for kids. Chronic absenteeism is at an all-time high. So our theory is that teachers are taking more days because they are also recovering from a time period when we all wore masks and we're all getting reacclimated to all the cooties that are around for everyone, but also it might be a mental health issue. So we're tracking it that way, but I always ask, well, what was it like pre-pandemic? And so, for example, we had 280 people out last Friday in the district, 280 out of 2,000. That was right in keeping with pre-pandemic levels. So I mean, there may be a different story, and we're certainly looking forward to working with our NTA partners to explore what that is. And I want to say, I know much is made of how the NTA is functioning with us right now, but in terms of taking care of our people, the partnership could not be more creative, problem solving oriented, caring, warm. They're worried about the same things that we're worried about. And that's, I mean, this is all of our profession. So really strategizing about that. The reason that we started onto this was that Unit B memberships came with the Treasurer Walsh to see us this summer and said, look, this is getting crazy because the Unit B folks have to cover all these classes and they just can't do it. So this is a joint consideration. We're worried about this together. So I think that all the right brains are on it. We need to get out of this current negotiations mode and get back to normal life. And then we can start to solve some of these issues.
Very, very sobering. And I probably have more questions, but I will stop here because I think probably a little bit more beyond what we can discuss here in terms of time and other things. Thanks.
Anybody else have any comments? Did you have something else, Max?
Just two very brief additions to what I said previously. Teachers do very often offer, work that has to be done during that time, so it isn't necessarily completely lost time. And I also would say that right now, as somebody who's kind of physically in the buildings, there's a bit of a flu going around. So I think maybe at this very moment, we're experiencing a lot more absences than we might usually. So maybe not as terrible as it is.
I'll just add my brief opinion as a high school parent to this. So my daughter missed 2 of her blocks today because her teachers were out. And there has not been a week since September where she has gone a week of school without at least one canceled class. And so I think as a high school parent, it's something that's very much on my family's mind. And I've heard similarly from other high school parents. So whatever you can do collectively and collaboratively and caringly to address this problem, I think it is the thing about NPS that I am grumpiest about.
Got it.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Right. So we're moving on. The next order of our business is the PTO Equity Spending Committee presentation. So I'd like to invite to the front Dr. Renee McCall, our Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning. Is she with us this evening? And then Lori Zinner, Helen Macadia, and Michelle Say.
Thank you. Yeah, Renee was not in today, so.
Okay. So it may just be the 3 of you then? Thank you very much for coming. Maybe one of these. Oh. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, for that.
He does serve on us. Steve, you could be a guest star in this moment.
Right.
Wow.
So welcome very much.
It's like the Andrews sisters, you could be a trio.
It's just the arrows, right?
Good evening. The PTO Equity Spending Committee consists of representatives from the school committee, Newton Central Administration, elementary principals, and 3 representatives that are elected by the Newton PTO Council. I'm Lori Zinner. We have Helen and Michelle here as well. Apologies that Aisha's name is missing from the slide. She is also on our committee. Slight oversight. This committee was established to oversee PTO spending and communicate findings to the school committee. We are charged with collecting and reviewing PTO actual and budgeted spending to ensure compliance with the PTO equity spending guidelines. We will present fiscal year 23 spending tonight. You have all been given detailed information in the memo, so we will cover the highlights. Overall, the 21 PTOs spent just over $1 million in fiscal year 23. This was 14% more than the previous year. despite a decline of just over 2% in enrollment. Curriculum-related spending increased 28% year over year for a total of $515,000, or 49% of all PTO spending. The total curriculum-related spending by PTOs only represents the cost of the programs and does not include any volunteer hours related to execute these programs. Specifically, in regards to Creative Arts and Sciences, or CAS, which PTOs spent $225,000 last year. Technology is no longer a large driver of PTO spending now that NPS covers student devices. So thank you, NPS. We did have 8 elementary schools and 1 middle school make technology purchases last year. So what are curriculum-related spending items? Basically, if it is part of the classroom experience, it is curriculum-related. So this includes CAS programming, principal discretionary funds, classroom support, stuff for libraries, PE, music, art, field trip support, and teacher mini grants. The money spent by PTOs on curriculum-related items supports the classroom and educational experience of NPS students. And while it's not much in the grand scheme of things, this is money the district does not absorb. Again, the dollar amounts cited here do not include the volunteer hours needed to plan and execute programs like the Creative Arts and Sciences and PTO programs like teacher mini grants. Currently, only elementary school PTOs are subject to an equity cap. There is no cap for curricular-related spending at the middle and high school levels. Fiscal year 23 is our 3rd year of data collection of the secondary level. Prior to that, there was none. You can see that PTO curriculum spending across all levels has rebounded post-COVID. PTOs are providing more curricular-related support at the elementary level and the least at the high school level. Since there is no CAS at the high school level, if you take that out of the equation from the middle school and elementary spending, you get a spending per pupil of 35 per pupil in elementary, 18 per pupil in middle school, and 14 per pupil in high school. So there's a significant increase come for the elementary compared to high school. And I like the lines on that chart.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the elementary spending specifically. Overall, spending at the elementary schools, it continues to recover to pre-pandemic levels, increasing 20% over last year to $668,000. This is despite a decline in enrollment. Creative Arts and Sciences continues to be an experience-based equity item. This means that it does not fall within the $40 per pupil of spending that is defined in the equity cap. 5 largest areas of spending by PTOs included Creative Arts and Sciences, teacher, staff, and classroom support, principal discretionary funds, mini grants, and library. So the following chart, this is looking at actual spending by each elementary school. And it breaks down equity, Creative Arts and Sciences, technology, and unlimited spending. In this chart, you can see that we have a wide range of spending, and especially in the unlimited category, which is a category that we do not, we track, but we do not have a cap on. This is something that it includes community events, teacher appreciation, direct aid to families, things of that nature that allows each PTO to have its own set of priorities. In the next chart, we try to normalize the spending a little bit, looking at it on a per pupil basis. And so you can see that the disparity continues in this chart a little bit. Obviously, the equity spending is capped, and so we don't see a wide variance there. But in the other categories in the category of unlimited, we continue to see that trend. Per pupil spending on equity items ranged from $25 per student to $44 per student. And I'm going to go to the next slide, which looks just at the equity spending. And this slide allows us to take a look more closely at spending by school. And we can see here that we have, even though it's not a very large range, we do have a range in spending. We have on the low end, we have Lincoln Elliott at $25 per pupil. We did have 2 schools that exceeded the equity cap this year. And these are 2 violations that were referred to Dr. Nolan for her review. The equity cap of $40 per pupil remains in effect through June 2025. And I believe next year we can, as a committee, look and see if this should be changed. However, we should remember that projected enrollment is continuing to decline, right? These are the numbers that we have looked at. And so the school's equity cap is going to shrink as a result. So we're going to see more schools bumping up against that $40 number. Now, whether that is a reason to increase the cap or not, that's, discussion we can have at a different time. But we just want to lay that out there, that there will be pressure on this $40 per pupil number, just because the cap, the dollar numbers are going to be shrinking. We also want to point out that we don't have a bottom to the equity cap. So at this point, schools can decide to spend 0. PTOs can decide to spend 0 on equity at their schools. And while this hasn't happened, we do have schools that have not reached close to the $40 range. And so that's another reason why we're not advocating to increase the cap at this time, but it's just something to consider, something to think about.
Okay, so we're going to move on to middle schools. Like I said, this is the 3rd year that we've collected data at the middle school level. While total PTO spending was down 4% at the middle school level, curriculum-related items continue to be a significant portion of PTO spending. It accounted for 59% of total spending for middle school PTOs. And as we saw at the district level, technology is a minimal spend with only one PTO making a purchase. And the pure pupil, well, we have charts. So just like elementary school, this is the total spending per school or PTO per school. You can see spending is similar for CAS and non-curricular categories. Day was a bit of an anomaly due to targeted fundraising that was for their music and drama program. And that falls under curricular support. So that's why their pink part is significantly larger. In an effort to normalize data, because let's face it, the population difference between Bigelow and Day is once twice the size of the other. Here it is in a per pupil form.
Night and day.
yes, night and day, literally night and day. I like how to do the math going, it's twice as many. Yeah. So, and again, the larger curricular support spending for Day is accounted for with that targeted fundraising that happened there. All right, on to high school. Also our 3rd year, I think, and the previous 2 years before this, we were coming out of COVID. So hopefully in the next, couple years, we'll be able to shed some more light on that data, to be determined. PTO spending at the high school level increased by 4% last year. There is less spending on curricular related items at this level, with only 34% of PTO money going towards curriculum related items. The majority is spent on items classified under the unlimited category, and neither high school spent anything on technology. We only have one chart for high school. We did not break that down to a per pupil. On that note, the per pupil spending was 12 per pupil at Newton North and 16 at South. So really not a large delta between the two. compared to the elementary level, the difference between the highest spending and lowest spending PTOs on curriculum related items, this is nothing. At the elementary level, the delta is $19 per pupil. And then we're talking $4 here. Middle schools had a $17 per pupil difference from the highest to the lowest spending schools.
And I think that concludes our schools piece. We just had a few open items. We wanted to ask to have the guidelines updated, but we touched base with Steve. I think we're all set with that.
Result.
So we can scratch that. I think also we, I think in meeting in June of 2022, it was presented, we had asked the school committee to address changing some of the language in the KDCE policy. And we wanted to follow up on that and just see kind of where we're at with that. And also, I think it was suggested at that time that the school committee construct parallel, a parallel
equity policy for the district.
Yes, for the district. So.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your presentation. Rajiv, do you want to start us off as the school committee member of this committee?
Yes, thank you. So first, a big thank you to the three of you, because along with the NPS team, there is a tremendous amount of effort that goes into gathering this information. I'm sure politely but firmly trying to nudge treasurers to fill in the forms and get the information to you. And the overarching goal, which is trying to make sure that we have a reasonably consistent experience based on this funding across our school, and there is in a variety of experiences, especially for our elementary school students. And some of it is based on this, some of the variety is due to differences in the quality of our buildings and locations and other things. So it's somewhat of a moving target, and I truly do appreciate the effort that goes into it. So that was one point. I think we as a group in June had broad agreement that these guidelines should be focused on PTOs. Right? There are many other ways that parents can support our schools, especially at the secondary level, that don't go through the PTOs. There are booster clubs, there are support groups of parents for various extracurricular activities. And so narrowing the scope is something I'm in favor of, and I think those of us who were working on this last year were also in favor of. Let's say this is for PTOs, these established guidelines that are hopefully reasonably understood, and even the couple of cases we had where where two PTOs exceeded the $40 limit. Let's say there was no harm intended. Let's put it that way, and there are more details behind that have been shared with Anna. I also think that we face a broader challenge, and this is probably not the time to get into it, but in terms of an equity approach for the school district. And there's the kind of the competing goals of wanting to have an equity approach, not having something that's too onerous, not having something that overly restrains parents from being supportive of schools. So I think there's a lot more to it, and it's a broader issue than certainly this group wants to tackle. But it is something for us to think about as we go into next year. So those were my thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other comments, thoughts, questions?
First and foremost, having sat there, doing it back here, a huge thank you, because I, like Rajiv, fully understand the heavy lift that it takes to maintain this, and the data collection, and the analysis, and the passion. I mean, you're here because you care deeply about this, obviously, and so thank you for that. A huge thank you. I guess I have a question that you don't have an answer to, but I thought was interesting. First of all, I'm happy that the PTO spending is starting to rebound from the pandemic, just in general, in terms of the health of the PTO and in parent involvement. So that's great. It really has to do with targeted fundraising in the secondaries, but I suspect that's more a question for Henry and for Tampy than it is for you. But it's just interesting that that's not happening anymore. That was a big deal at North and South, was the targeted fundraising.
What is your question?
It's not being done anymore, and I'm just curious to know why it's not being done anymore. It was just such a logical PTO thing that had gone on at North for many years and at South for, I'd say, 5 years. So,
but I can only comment on North, but it's definitely happening at North. Like the campaign last year was for physics equipment, and for this year, the campaign at North is for arts equipment.
Was it? I don't know if that was reflected in the data that we got from you.
We didn't get any. No, we didn't get any. I feel pretty confident there is nothing in that spreadsheet that mentions.
This is moving ahead.
No, for even fiscal year 23, because Kathy was saying there was something last year, right?
Yeah, so I wrote my check for the physics equipment.
You're like, I know I did
the PTO last year, so I know it happened, and I
that's more information for you, I guess, for next year.
We have found that the data is only as accurate as it's inputted.
Thank you.
So, did you want to add something?
Well, I just want to say thank you for the layup into that moment. It's like you knew I wanted to say this. So just coming from another district, and I'm new, and I'm going to the PTOC tomorrow night to have a first conversation about this, but this business of what fundraising is happening when is something that we do have to get our hands around a little bit more. If for no other reason that people call our office and say, is this a legitimate Newton Public Schools fundraiser? And we can't answer that question right now, and you shouldn't have to track that solely. So I'm going to the PTOC just so people understand that the Attorney General's office governs what happens with PTOs. And we never want our PTOs or our district in the situation of, is this a fundraiser that's legit or not? So for instance, last year across Metro West, lots of scams happened where, especially at athletic events, someone would come by and say, hey, donate $5 to this t-shirt fund, and we'll give all the t-shirts and the proceeds to the Newton schools. Arrives at the athletic office, an awful box of t-shirts with an iron-on that like my 2-year-old could have done. And nobody ordered those shirts, and nobody got the money except the scammer who ordered the t-shirts and sent them to our AD's office. So that was happening all across Metro West last year. And the way that we can get around that is to simply publish what are the open fundraisers in our school system at any given time. And so we've started to say, how can we do that in a way that doesn't kill the principals or the coaches? Turns out our coaches are actually tracking it quite carefully, so are our boosters. So we just have a little tightening up to do about that, which would save us this moment of like, who's fundraising for what? And are you sure that's legit? Or did Kathy just write a check for physics equipment to some random like person, right? So that's something that I'm looking into just to help. But I did have one other question, if that's okay. What was the sort of policy that was envisioned? You mean a general equity policy for the district that governs all programs and like other districts have through MASC?
I think well, we have the KCBE language, correct? And I think the idea was that there would be something similar to that.
Because that policy is specific only to PTOs,
right?
Which, to be honest, when I first read it, I thought it was overarching for both.
Yeah.
And then in talking to people going, no, that was specific for PTOs, I was like, well, that's not very clear.
Okay. So meaning to govern schools and their execution of their funds as well. Got it. And then if I have one other question. So what is keeping schools from spending their total cap?
The lack of funds, possibly. Okay. So none of this data speaks to how much each school is raising each year.
We don't collect that data.
PTOs raise like various amounts of money. And so a school that's spending, like Lincoln Elliott, that spends $25 of their $40 potential cap is maybe only raising half the amount or a quarter of the amount that another elementary school is. So the funds are so different. And so, I mean, I know that you have all the data, you have the slides, but we just sort of also wanted to highlight that, like, there is no ceiling. I mean, there's no floor. There's a ceiling, but because there's no floor, there have been schools in the past who like elementary schools that have chosen to do 0 CAS programs in a given year. And because these are curricular adjacent, curricular related programs that support or, you know, have a lot to do with the curriculum, CAS by design, all the programs are related to the curriculum in the various grades. So certain schools are not getting that, you know, each year, and then other schools are maxing them out. So that can be a huge discrepancy. And also the way schools organize it, like one school might choose to do only programs for, you know, 2nd, 3rd, and 5th grade, whereas another school will make sure that they have 3 programs for every grade every year. And that's their priority for spending. So there isn't as much governance over that as I think maybe some of us would like to see, just as far as equity goes in terms of, you know, each student's experience and then in schools. And so I think that's something that I'm hoping that everybody can sort of leave here and think about, that PTO funds and the way PTOs decide to spend their money is actually having a significant impact on potential equity of, you know, the educational experience, particularly for at the primary level.
I will say on the CAS note, you know, some schools will choose to do more of like assembly type programs where you do multiple grades in an assembly setup, where other schools, which that usually typically costs less, and other schools will do more like individual classroom presentations, which will cost more. And so, I mean, it's nice to have that flexibility. So if a school doesn't have that money to spend, they can still offer some sort of enrichment programming, but it does, if you're a school that's underfunded chronically, then you may have more of those assembly type, which is going to be a different experience.
Right. There's no standard.
Right.
Go ahead. Just to tag on to that, if y'all can figure out how to deal with the floor issue, I mean, in terms of, we're talking about the ceiling and the floor and raising the floor, which has been an issue for forever. If you can figure that out, seriously.
I mean, that's been my issue with the whole equity thing. I mean, this goes back 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
I'm like, how does lowering the ceiling bring up the bottom? It doesn't. And so
I totally agree with you. You need to do both.
Right.
And when we did lower the ceiling, we did say we need to increase the floor, but it didn't necessarily go anywhere, which is why if you could figure it out, that would be amazing.
It's certainly a challenge, I think, we can't dictate to PTOs how they spend their money. And so, you know, I'm not sure unless we start thinking about, okay, let's look at equity and what are those things, what are all those things that we're spending money on? And are those things that are they really curricular in nature and not curricular adjacent or curricular supportive? And are those things that should be absorbed by the district? You know, those are the kinds of questions maybe we should be looking at too.
Similar to like technology, right? It wasn't that long ago when PTOs were purchasing Chromebook carts and iPads. And like I said, we're very grateful that MPS, you know, as a parent, like grateful, that's awesome. But are there other things that, you know, if 12 or 13 of the elementary schools have a day in Ghana as a presentation in 2nd grade, what does it say for the 2 or 3 schools that don't get it? And it's a great program. My older son had it, my younger didn't because of COVID, but so I think it's a very valuable program. And so is there a way that, you know, I know that getting money from NPS right now is not an easy ask, but is that just a way to be able to support? And we didn't look at the exact, we do have the programs that each school did. And I'm interested to see what it says as far as we look at the data of like how many schools had each of these programs, how many had individual classrooms versus assembly based. If there was, you know, data to support that, like, oh no, most PTOs are getting this except for we have a small portion that's not. And how is that equitable?
To piggyback on what you're saying, I think also would be really important and helpful if MPS could develop a classroom standard. We currently have a technology standard, but we do not have a classroom standard. And so a lot of the things that PTOs are providing sometimes can be considered, you know, are in that gray area of, is it a classroom?
A lot of the questions that we get on what PTOs are allowed to spend money on, like bookcases, other furniture, rugs, fans, copy machine, things like that. Because there is no, well, for the copy machines, but for a lot of classroom items, it's really hard for anybody to interpret whether that's something that should be allowed or prohibited. That's something that sort of falls under the responsibility of NPS or.
Yeah, and I think by classroom standard, we mean like literally like what is in a classroom physically, and also the educational pieces. What are the educational pieces that make up that educational standard in the classroom?
So I think to answer to talk about Emily's question, I think the fundamental issue is that it's really hard to regulate and provide standards for something that you are asking volunteers to provide, and also that you're fundraising, from the community. It's donations, so it's hard to make requirements of those things. But at the same time, for all the things that are curricular related, you want to provide some kind of structure so that across the board over 15 elementary schools, you can be sure that things are equitable. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. To thank all three of you. I want to make a comment first. I'll come back to you in a second. I just wanted to thank all three of you for doing this work. So 6 years ago, I was a new school committee member, and serving on the equity committee was something I did for the first couple of years. And then I served on the follow-on committee that looked at the possibility of trying to establish a central fund. And so it is something very near and dear to my heart. And so Anna, for your historical perspective, this question of raising the floor, there was quite a lot of work done, both in this committee and then in a sort of follow-on separate committee about various structures and proposals for various structures that would establish a central fund to help provide funding, because no surprise, it's the same schools year after year that aren't able to spend what some other schools are able to spend. And I think some of that simply comes from the fact that there are different socioeconomics in our neighborhood schools. And whereas one school might have a mystery dinner hosted in people's homes and the ticket price is $200 and everybody goes, the concept of even doing that in another school is offensive, understandably so. And so there have been, over the last couple of years, and I think a lot of this was derailed by the pandemic, but ideas and proposals about how, if it might be possible to establish a central fund that would work on this raising the floor piece, which I think is really important and worthy of further attention and development work going forward. And I don't know who's going to do that work, because it's hard work to do. And I think it burned out the group of us that was doing it. And I may be willing to do it in the future again when I don't sit up here anymore, but I'm flagging it as something that is worthy of work in the future.
Well, also just really quickly, you also mentioned it's all volunteer power is the other thing, to have a committee to look into that further, like what we do. And I think that's also a big discrepancy among some of the elementary schools. Some schools just have really enthusiastic PTOs, and some, all the parents are working and, there's no time and there's just no energy or desire to go around, trying to excite people about PTO. Sorry.
Chris, did you want to make a comment or ask a question?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, thanks for all the work you folks doing. It's a big lift every year. We go through this exercise, reviewing a lot of numbers here, but you delved into something that I think is kind of goes a little bit to where my head's always been with this, in the sense of, these are independent organizations. We can't tell them how they spend their money, what to do, how they want to raise it, whatever. And then also delved into, these kind of broader equity issues, and the concept of a classroom standard is interesting, in the same way that there was a lot of protest, and I think rightly so, from folks who said, look, our school isn't at our technology standard. We're not meeting the basic requirements, but yet you're not going to let parents go fund that. All the, brand new schools don't need to have parents fund. It's funded. But, as when we were still in that stage where, PTOs were largely funding technology at the elementary level, that was a big hurdle, and that having that sort of standard and allowing people to spend up to it was a at least reasonable approach to get to that. And something like the classroom standard might and this is just that's the first time I've really thought about that concept, but might be some way to move forward on that. I won't go too far into this, to the rest of my comments are really from my colleagues. I think, I discussed this last year. I discussed this in connection with the request to have the school committee support a central fund or in whatever form that took. I don't exactly remember. But there are parts of this that worry me. And specifically some of that is in, some of the language of these guidelines, where we are taking very prescriptive measures with these independent 501c3 organizations that have their own identities, that have their own board of directors, that have their own bylaws, and we are really directing budgetary activities, and even going so far to, I think, the most sort of problematic piece is probably this concept of there's going to be some potential punishment meted out to you by the superintendent, subject to a appeals process to the school committee. I don't know that really sits well with me in terms of recognizing the independence of these organizations and our ability as an organization to say we have the right to accept or not accept any donation you want to bring forth. And I still believe, and I know I brought this up last year, I still believe framing this as an acceptance guideline and not a spending guideline could really, I think we could simplify a lot of this. There's so much work that goes into this. And, every year I think to myself, there's a very good core concept in here and something we're trying to achieve, which is something we should be trying to achieve. And then, we're, grinding our PTO treasurers and presidents to the bone with diminishing returns as we go through increasing levels of precision on, the last penny that was spent for some of these things and adjudicating, is this curriculum? Is it curriculum adjacent? Is it, I really think we can simplify this process, and I think that would be that would be an effort worth undertaking, particularly as we have limits on what you can give to staff as a gift. That is a codified policy. We have a codified policy on other gifts and donations, and the vested authority in the superintendent to accept them or not. And then, we move into this with the guidelines and the big, the big pages of guidelines and massive charts of every item under the sun. I would really like to see us rethink this in part to move towards saying we as a district will be willing to accept these things. We will be willing to accept these things up to a certain amount, but we don't need to go through the level of exercise we've gone through to prove this out year after year.
And I know we're at the end and it's almost 9 and I find part of the next thing and then we're done. So I just have to respond. I agree with you, Chris. I do agree with you in theory, but one of the reasons why this has become so detailed and prescriptive is because PTOs have questions, and that's where this has all come from. And so every time a question came up about, well, can we spend it on this? Okay, then a decision had to be made, and then it's like, well, let's put it in the guidelines so people in the future know what they can and can't spend. So do I think that this has gotten a wee bit out of control. I'm not going to disagree with you on that. But I mean, and even the flow chart, I mean, which was brilliant, right? It was and necessary. However, I hear what you're saying, but I think it's also worth explaining why it got to be where it is now, just for us to understand.
Can I also just say, I strongly encourage that this process be revisited and examined. The solution would be to remove anything that is curricular from PTO spending, and then you wouldn't have to worry about equity. That's sort of where it is. Like, the reason why we even care about any of this is because we want students to have similar experiences. And, you know, we can also say, like, oh, the district is willing to accept this amount of money, but if nobody's overseeing that, then there's really nothing preventing things from sort of falling through the cracks all the time. And like I've always told all the PTOs that we meet with, like, we're not the police. We're not trying to like crack down on people. We're just trying to help everybody achieve the same goal, we hope. And actually, like, we have started to run into some pushback from PTOs. They say, like, why are you even collecting this money? Like, what do you care? And like, we care because we want all the schools to have like a similar experience. And like, we just keep on saying that, but without having sort of, you know, like appropriate guidelines reflected by the school committee, for us to say that we're coming as a subcommittee of the school committee to collect this data, it falls a little bit flat. So it would be great to have, you know, something to back us up in what we're doing as volunteers. Because I do think that district-wide, there is not a great understanding of who cares about this and why. And obviously, each school's PTO is going to want their school to have as much as they can. You know, like if I'm at Bowen, I want Bowen kids to have as many curricular experiences as possible, right? Because my kid goes to Bowen. But like, that's why it's difficult to leave it to each PTO and to say, like, each principal, you know, we say that we're going to accept this, but like, I don't know, you know, something that maybe or may not be.
As the previous speaker said, what gets monitored gets done. It really resonated with me. And that's, none of the PTOs have ill will and are trying to, but there's definitely, if there wasn't any monitoring, then would it happen? Would it inadvertently happen? And it creeps up a little bit here and there. And the schools that are still not getting to the cap are still left down.
Right. Those students are getting left behind every year, right? So you're talking about like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years of students from one school not having 3 fewer experiences than kids from another school. So I think if there were no curricular items that PTOs were spending on, they could spend on anything they wanted. It would be awesome. So that's sort of I'll leave you with that.
Tanika has her hand up.
Tanika, throw it to you.
Thank you. So to the extent that PTO dollars funnel into so many various pieces of the student experience in every single one of our schools, I would rather be overly prescriptive than missing whole swaths that then tip that balance, impact the scale of what is delivered at one school versus another school. I would rather we err on the side of more and having this very detailed, very nuanced, very thoughtful process year over year than that we let some things kind of slide by, get slipped under the rug. It's not at all my concept of us being able to say that we are one district, for there to be these vast distinctions between what students at a particular school get as opposed to students at another school. We're one school district. So that's all I'm going to say on that score. I think, Chris, to the extent that we can think about how to improve this process, for sure, I am with you. And then the last thing I wanted to say is just a very brief thank you to these ladies and everyone who sits on the Equity Spending Committee. You are doing a thankless job. We recognize that, and nonetheless, we appreciate it. So thank you for that.
Before you go, I just wanted to pick up your 2 remaining open items. Those are both matters that the school committee's policy subcommittee should look at. And in my remaining couple of weeks, we will do that. It may be that we pass them off to the next iteration of the policy subcommittee, but we will get to those. I am sorry that we dropped the ball on them in June, but we will turn back to them and deal with them promptly.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Further comments, questions?
Thank
Thank you again very much.
So I just sent you a sample equity policy to look at in case we want to accelerate this.
All right, so we're going to turn now to our last business item of the evening, which is the budget guidelines. Emily and Rajiv, I don't know which of you wishes to walk us through this.
I can take the first crack, and Emily will jump in and correct me as necessary. So you have in your packets two items. One is the memo that Emily and I sent out a few days ago asking for input. The second is the draft of the budget guidelines for fiscal year 25. And I'll just hit the highlights of this, and obviously we can discuss in more detail. First, the work on this was, I think, a lot easier thanks to what Paul and Emily did for the previous year. So we had an excellent baseline to work from. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Emily, for that. And thank you also to the school committee members who were able to provide some inputs and their thoughts on changes to the guidelines for this year. The positioning of the guidelines start off with, this is a year of significant optimism. We are in a situation where there are a lot of positive things about Newton Public Schools and our community that stay the same. We have a community that is dedicated to education, that is dedicated to supporting our schools. We have excellent administrators, staff, and supportive parents and guardians. So something we want to hold on to. What's driving our optimism? We have a new superintendent who brings a fresh perspective, a collaborative leadership approach, and ambitious plans to ensure that we remain one of the premier school districts in the country, not the Commonwealth, but the country. That is going to take a lot of support across the board from us, from our teachers, from our administrative staff. We certainly face the challenge of ensuring that our collective bargaining agreement is in place, and we can move forward with, again, the ambitious agenda we're thinking about. So specifically in terms of the priorities, we heard from most, if not all, of the members that Anna, the entry plan is going to be a key guide for those budget priorities. Looking at what the key challenges are, what we need to focus on, what we need to continue to ensure is excellent. That, I think, is the overlay across the priorities. And then several specific items came up. One is class sizes. We have heard loud and clear from educators, and I think we all knew this already, that class sizes determine excellence, and excellence is one of our two key pillars. So a focus on class sizes as we put the budget together, especially in the high schools, is something that came through loud and clear from the school committee. The second thing is the breadth of programming, and I think that some of this is a reaction to having to cut certain programs over the last couple of years. We have excellent breadth of programming from core STEM courses, fine arts, the CTE programs, extracurricular activities, sports. We offer tremendous resources to our students, and we want to continue offering those resources. Anna, I recall that you mentioned various ways in which we can maintain the breadth by potentially collaborating with other school districts or taking an out-of-the-box thinking approach to some of these. Would love to hear more about those as part of the budget process and discussions leading up to it, but certainly we want to ensure that we're not losing the breadth of programming acknowledging that we've had to actually make some cuts in the last couple of years to that breadth. Alongside that, the educational programming, ensuring that the educational experience of all learners is a priority, making sure we're using data-supported interventions that support evidence-based curricula and consistency. I know that again is something we've heard from you. What our students are learning in third grade should, to the extent possible, be consistent across schools, and the ability for teachers to customize learning for students that require that customization should also be there. Alongside that, we need to up our game on professional development. We have the new literacy curriculum. We have a lot of strong aspirational goals as well as programs that are in place. We need to ensure that our teachers are at the cutting edge of best practices, new curricula, new approaches to teaching that are going to help, again, all students across all levels of our schools. We today talked about mental health support for our educators, but certainly making sure that we are preserving the supports that exist, and to the extent possible, increasing those supports is important. Several of us have brought up caseloads and other metrics for what we can do to ensure that our staff are not getting burned out supporting our students and the higher needs. So that is something that we think is important. On education as well, the other recommendation that's been in place before is to try and keep our special education students in district to the extent that makes sense and is possible. I think the expectation is that when we establish new programs, set up new classrooms and so on, that in the long run, what we're going to see is actual financial benefit, where it's either neutral or a positive to keep our students closer to home and establish those platforms. And we acknowledge that there are going to be situations where we don't necessarily have that expertise or that program for specific students, and it makes sense for them to be elsewhere with our support. And finally, the operational infrastructure. We have talked many times after you've come on board and before that about the chronic underfunding and subsequent overage on maintenance for our physical plant. We would like to make sure there is sufficient budget for all the critical items. There are many items that end up being bumped from, say, the summer list to the following year and then bumped again and so on. Some of these items are critical, and we have to figure out how to address those because they're going to get more and more expensive to address over time. We also talked a little bit about wanting to make sure that the items at the secondary schools are looked at, because a lot of those have to do with systems as opposed to any kind of major build or renovation. But even in Newton North, which is relatively newer, there are HVAC updates to be made and other fixes that again are not optional, right? And I know you'll be working with Liam and others to figure out what hits that critical level for this year or next year or the year after. But kicking the can down the road on these has not worked out well for us so far. That, of course, means that we've asked you to prioritize everything.
Thank you all.
So I apologize for that in advance, but I think what we laid out is roughly in sequence of prioritization.
Okay.
Can I just add one quick thing though?
Please, please do.
I forget. So the secondary school piece was not meant just for HVAC systems. It's a broader view of the secondary schools as well.
It covers more, and it includes the middle schools.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay,
just to
so
be
you
clear.
mean building systems though?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And
building conditions and
yep,
lab space in high schools and that kind of thing. So.
and the status of how the middle schools are.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
We have 4 in varying levels of what's the word we'd use? Of condition,
yep.
Varying conditions, and I know this is something the team looks at regularly, but we need to think about that. The overriding principles, though, the things that really came through and mattered were class sizes, supporting academics for all our learners, and ensuring program breadth. So I think those things are really our key focus areas, not surprisingly. The other things also have to happen. So I hope this is helpful. I know we're asking a lot, but we are excited about what you've laid out in the entry plan and in your assessment of the district, and we have to figure out ways to make it happen.
Okay. This is super helpful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I have a real vision of what to do with the principals next. And Liam and I have just set down a few changes to the way that typical budgeting processes have happened so that we can incorporate this feedback in early. So thank you.
So I also, just from a process perspective, want to say what I don't want to do tonight is to try to edit a Word, document by committee, because that's going to A, take a long time, and B, is not productive in terms of all of our times this evening. So if people have, I would say, major changes that they're looking for, not necessarily, well, I think that instead of excellence, you should use some other word. Like that's not the level of editing I think that we're looking for. But if there's something egregious that we missed or that you completely disagree with, you should email just me and Rajiv. So, do you have anything else to say?
No. Thank you very much.
So just to clarify, in terms of process, then you will incorporate any feedback that you receive, and in our next school committee packet, we will get a revised version, and we will vote on these at our December 18th meeting.
That's great.
Yes, that's correct. This was the document clearly had the word draft in it, and at least in the document name.
Got it.
And so it is hopefully a fairly advanced draft, and we're soliciting input and feedback.
Okay. Any comments or questions for this evening's discussion on the budget guidelines? All right, seeing none, we have concluded the posted business for this evening's meeting. Our next meeting will be on Monday, December 18th. So thank you to everyone who joined us, both in the school committee chamber and online, and to all of our central staff and our guests who presented. We appreciate your participation and the information that you provided. So our meeting is now adjourned.
Recording